Have you ever noticed how the world rushes to label a woman who stands alone? They'll say she's lonely, they'll say she's bitter, they'll say she's too hard to love, but they never stop to ask, what if she's not lonely? What if she's just focused? What if solitude isn't her punishment, but her power? You see, in a world obsessed with connection, likes, follows, group chats, invites, being seen, there's something radical about a woman who chooses herself, a woman who doesn't chase belonging, who doesn't beg for a seat at someone else's table, who doesn't shrink herself just to fit in. That woman, she's not broken. She's building. And let me tell you the truth that most people are afraid to say out loud. Sometimes the most powerful season of your life will look like isolation. There comes a point when the noise around you gets so loud, you can't even hear your own thoughts. So you step back, you log off, you stop replying. Not because you're angry, but because you're done abandoning yourself for the comfort of being included. There's this illusion that the more people we have around us, the more loved we are. But the truth is, the crowd can't save you when you don't know who you are. And many women, maybe even you, have spent years filling their life with people, but still feel empty. You smiled through conversations that drained you. You nodded at opinions that didn't match your truth. You stayed in rooms that dimmed your light because the silence outside felt scarier than the noise within. But the moment you stop fearing solitude is the moment you stop needing validation. And that is the moment you rise. Independence is not about rejection, it's about reclamation. It's reclaiming the parts of yourself you buried just to keep the peace. It's reclaiming the dreams you silenced to seem realistic. It's reclaiming your own time, your own space, your own voice without asking for permission. We've been conditioned to believe that strength looks like support systems, community, connection. And yes, those are beautiful when they are real. But what if the support system you need most is the one inside you? The version of you who refuses to quit. The version who wakes up alone but still shows up fully. The version who has your back when no one else does. That is where true power begins. When you learn to sit with yourself, not in loneliness, but in leadership. Most people are terrified of being alone because they don't know how to be with themselves. They've built their identity around who they are to others, not who they are within. But you, the woman who walks alone, you are doing the work they avoid. You are shedding the need for performance. You are dismantling the stories that told you your worth is tied to how many people clap for you. Because when you realize you were never meant to fit in, you were meant to break patterns, everything shifts. Solitude isn't silence. It's signal clarity. It's where your intuition gets louder. It's where you stop second-guessing yourself. It's where you realize you were never too much. You were just in the wrong room. And here's the truth. The most transformative growth you will ever experience will often begin in solitude. Why? Because solitude strips away the distractions. It shows you what's real. It reveals the habits you've ignored, the pain you've been running from, the boundaries you've been too afraid to enforce. Solitude isn't about cutting people off. It's about cutting back to the truth. I know. It's not easy. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, when the silence feels too loud, when you question if you're being strong or just scared. But listen, strength is not about pretending to be okay. It's about choosing what's right for you, even when it's hard. And sometimes what's right is walking alone, not because you're unworthy of connection, but because you're finally unwilling to settle for connection that cost your peace. A woman who chooses solitude is not fragile. She's fortifying. She's learning how to be her own comfort, her own compass, her own home. She's not avoiding intimacy. She's preparing for the kind of intimacy that doesn't require self-abandonment. She's building a life so whole that when someone walks in, it's not to complete her, it's to complement her. Let me ask you this. What would your life look like if you stopped fearing solitude and started embracing it as your training ground for greatness? What could shift in your career, your mindset, your relationships if you stopped apologizing for standing alone and started seeing it as sacred? What could heal if you stopped distracting yourself with company and started devoting yourself to clarity? Because the woman who walks alone isn't weak. She's just not for the crowd. She's for the calling, pagered. So here's your invitation. Start honoring the quiet. Start trusting your instincts. Start walking in alignment, even if no one claps for you right now. because the applause will come. The people meant for you will come. The love that doesn't require performance will come, but none of it will matter if you lose yourself trying to find them. So find you first. Walk with you first. Heal with you first. And when you rise, because you will, you won't need the crowd to tell you you're enough. You'll already know. Reflection question. Are you filling your life with people to avoid the silence, or are you using the silence to finally meet yourself? If this message spoke to your season, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Daja, like this video if you felt a shift. Pass. And don't forget to subscribe. This is just the beginning of your inner evolution. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Let's talk about something that hits deeper than we admit. We live in a world where people collect relationships like trophies, more friends, more followers, more connections, more group chats. But I want to ask you something. When life breaks you open, how many of those people actually show up? Not just with an emoji, not just with a comment, but with presence, with honesty, with love that doesn't flinch in the face of your pain. Because there's a painful truth most people don't want to face. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. You see, the quality of your life is directly connected to the quality of your relationships, not the quantity. And yet, so many people chase numbers. Why? Because quantity is easier. It's easier to host a party than to have one hard conversation. It's easier to take a group photo than to sit in someone's silence. It's easier to keep it surface level than to go deep. But you're not here for ease. You're here for truth. You're here for depth. You're here to build connections that hold you, not hollow you. Let me tell you what I've learned in my own journey. There was a time in my life when I thought being liked was the same as being loved. I thought having a crowd around me meant I was doing something right. But the more I grew, the more I realized being surrounded is not the same as being supported. Support doesn't always look like claps and compliments. Sometimes it's the friend who challenges your thinking. Sometimes it's the one who stays when you're not easy to be around. Sometimes it's the person who doesn't need access to your stage. They just want to see you whole behind the curtain. Those are the ones who matter. A woman walking this path of transformation learns something sacred. Not everyone deserves access to her. Not because she's better than anyone, but because she's learned the cost of her energy. She knows that time is not renewable and love is not to be wasted. She no longer entertains people who only show up when it's convenient. She no longer keeps friendships that thrive on gossip, not growth. She no longer sacrifices her peace for the illusion of belonging. She's done with the shallow end. She's diving deep now. Here's something I want you to carry with you. A smaller circle can hold more truth. You don't need 10 people pretending to understand you. You need one who really does. You don't need 1,000 followers watching your life. You need a few real ones walking with you through it. You need people who don't flinch when you cry, who don't leave when you're lost, who don't compete when you succeed. That's the difference between proximity and intimacy. Many will stand near you, but only a few will truly see you. And I know letting go is hard. It's not easy to release people who've been in your life for years, even if they've stopped growing with you. It's not easy to walk away from circles that once felt like home, even when they now feel like cages. But growth demands space, and you cannot bloom in soil that suffocates you. Sometimes you outgrow people not because you're ungrateful, but because you've grown too honest to keep pretending. You've grown too self-aware to keep shrinking. You've grown too clear to stay confused by their energy. And that's okay. Let me say this loud. Releasing someone doesn't make you a villain. It makes you a gardener of your own peace. And every woman who chooses quality over quantity is doing just that. She's tending to her life like sacred soil. She's pulling out the weeds of one-sided loyalty. She's watering the roots of the relationships that actually nourish her. And yes, sometimes that garden looks sparse. Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 people who truly get you. Sometimes it's just you and God, or you and your journal. But that's not emptiness. That's intentionality. That's how forests begin, with just one tree rooted deep. There's a false idea that solitude equals failure in relationships. But maybe, just maybe, solitude is what makes space for the real ones to arrive. You can't attract what's true while you're holding on to what's temporary. You can't receive depth while you're surrounded by distractions. You can't hear your soul when you're drowning in surface level noise. Sometimes, the space between goodbye and new connection is where your spirit resets. It's where you realign your values, your standards, your energy. Because a woman who knows her worth doesn't keep relationships out of fear. She keeps them out of love, real love, not the kind that performs, not the kind that's attached to convenience, but the kind that stays when things are messy, when growth is uncomfortable, when truth is hard to hold. So I want you to ask yourself something. Who in your life actually sees you? Not the version you perform, but the version you protect. And if the answer is very few, that's okay. That's where the gold island, because the people who really matter won't need you to entertain them. They won't need you to shrink, to soften, to hide. They'll sit in your truth. They'll witness your pain. They'll match your growth. And guess what? You deserve that. Listen to me carefully. Your peace is more important than being popular. Your healing is more important than keeping the illusion alive. Your future deserves friends who protect your present. So don't be afraid to say goodbye, even with tears in your eyes, even when it's messy, even when you feel guilty, because on the other side of goodbye is room. Room for the real ones. Room for your own clarity. Room for deeper connection, not wider distraction. In the end, relationships are not built on how many people surround you. They're built on how many stay when the room goes quiet. So let it go. Let it thin out. Let it shrink. Because in that sacred space, you'll find people who don't just meet you. They meet your soul. There's a kind of silence that isn't empty. It's full of truth, full of answers, full of the things you've spent years running from. And when a woman finds herself alone, truly alone, not distracted, not pretending, not numbing, she steps into a space most people avoid their entire lives. Because in that space of solitude, something happens. The masks fall off. The roles dissolve. And what's left is her, not the daughter, not the friend, not the girlfriend or the wife, just her raw, unfiltered, unprotected by titles or expectations. And in that moment, for the first time in maybe forever, she finally gets to ask, who am I when no one else is watching? Most people never go there. They stay surrounded by noise. They stay busy. They keep talking, keep scrolling, keep performing, because self-reflection requires courage. Not the kind of courage that shows up in front of others, but the kind that shows up within. It's the courage to face your patterns, your pain, your projections, without blame, without denial, without distraction. And solitude is the only place that kind of truth can breathe. You see, solitude isn't punishment, it's purification. It's where the world gets stripped away so that your soul can speak clearly. It's where you stop editing your emotions to make them palatable. It's where you confront the habits you've called just who I am and ask, is this still serving me? And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. When the conversations stop, when the group chats go silent, when there's no one to vent, to impress or distract yourself with, you're left with you. And if you don't know yourself, that silence will feel deafening. But here's the power in that moment. Solitude gives you a mirror you can't walk away from. It shows you the beliefs you inherited without question. It shows you the wounds you've been patching instead of healing. It shows you the goals you're chasing that were never yours to begin with. And it also shows you the real you, the version of yourself before the world told you who to be. That version is still there, waiting, watching, hoping you'll slow down long enough to remember her. I remember the first time I sat in true solitude, not a meditation retreat, not a weekend getaway. I'm talking about the kind of solitude where you strip away the titles, the plans, the expectations, and just be, at first, it felt like loss of identity, loss of control, loss of purpose. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized it wasn't loss. It was rediscovery, because you can't meet your true self while you're distracted by the performance of who you think you're supposed to be. This is why solitude is sacred for any woman on the path of growth. It's where you begin to separate your truth from your trauma, where you see the difference between your intuition and your fear, where you start to ask, why do I say yes when I want to say no? Why do I feel responsible for everyone's emotions but my own? Why do I keep playing small when I know I'm capable of more? These questions don't come from outside. They rise in the stillness, because stillness doesn't make you soft. It makes you sharp. Most people are reactive. They respond to life based on habit, not intention. They repeat emotional patterns passed down like family recipes. But a woman who chooses solitude gets to break that chain. She gets to observe instead of react. She gets to pause instead of perform. She gets to choose instead of chase. That's the power of self-reflection. It rewires the way you live. In solitude, you'll start to see what triggers you and why, what fills you and what drains you, what's real and what's just noise. And as painful as some of those revelations might be, they become the foundation of your transformation. Because transformation isn't about adding more, it's about releasing what never belonged in the first place. Let me be real with you. There will be days when the silence feels too much, when you want to reach out to someone just to fill the void, when your thoughts feel like too much to sit with, but don't rush to escape it. Because on the other side of that discomfort is clarity. Clarity about your values, clarity about your boundaries, clarity about the life you're building and who you're becoming. And that clarity is priceless. We live in a world that values fast answers and quick distractions, but deep healing doesn't happen fast. Self-awareness doesn't happen in the noise. Growth doesn't happen when you're always on. It happens when you pause, when you look inward, when you realize that everything you've been seeking externally, love, approval, peace, was always waiting inside you to be remembered. So I want to invite you into a different kind of rhythm, one where you don't just exist to respond to others, but one where you respond to yourself daily, intentionally, with grace. Take the journal out, ask the uncomfortable questions, sit in the silence and listen, because your soul has been whispering truths to you for years. You've just been too loud to hear them. A woman who practices self-reflection in solitude becomes untouchable, not because she avoids pain, but because she understands it. She's no longer led by her wounds. She's no longer hijacked by her emotions. She's no longer afraid of being alone because she's finally befriended herself. And when a woman becomes her own best friend, her own mirror, her own guide, she stops chasing peace because she becomes it. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. Who are you when you're not performing? Not performing for your parents, not performing for society, not performing for the version of yourself you think the world wants to see. Just you, unfiltered, unpolished, unapologetic. Most people don't know because they've spent their entire lives becoming what's expected instead of becoming who they really are. From the moment you were born, the world started writing your script. Be nice, be polite, be pretty, be agreeable, be liked, be everything for everyone, and lose yourself in the process. And if you dare to step outside the script, you're labeled too much, too loud, too quiet, too independent, too emotional, too ambitious. But here's the truth. You will always be too much for the people who want to keep you small. And society loves keeping women small. We're taught to measure our worth in approval, to find our identity in how many people validate our choices, to fear judgment more than we fear self-betrayal. But what if just for a moment you decided that being misunderstood was better than being fake? What if you chose truth over performance, even if it cost you popularity? What if living authentically wasn't your risk, but your responsibility? Because authenticity doesn't just set you free, it sets the next generation free. Here's what I've learned through my own battles with identity. Living authentically will cost you the version of yourself that was built for approval. And that's not a loss, that's a rebirth. There was a time I thought I had to fit into every room. I adjusted my tone. I held back my truth. I shrunk my vision just to make others comfortable. But comfort is a poor trade for clarity. And I realized if I have to shrink to belong, I don't belong. That's when I started over. Not with a new life, but with a new truth. Not with a new identity, but with a return to my original essence. And that's what Authenticity Island, it's not creating a new self. It's unlearning everything that told you you couldn't be yourself. Authenticity is peeling back the layers of conditioning, the beliefs passed down, the fears projected onto you, the expectations that never fit. It's standing in front of a mirror and saying, I love this version not because she's perfect, but because she's real. But let's be real, authenticity isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it looks like leaving the group chat, declining the invite, disappointing the very people who once praised you because their version of you wasn't you. And that's the point. Authenticity is a boundary, not a performance. It doesn't ask, do they like me? It asks, am I being honest with myself? Because at the end of the day, peace doesn't come from applause. It comes from alignment, from waking up and knowing, I didn't betray myself today. Let me speak directly to the woman who's been holding it all in. You're not crazy for wanting more. You're not selfish for choosing yourself. You're not dramatic for calling out the lies you used to stay silent about. You're evolving. You're waking up. You're peeling away the layers of who they told you to be and becoming who you were born to be. And yes, it's going to shake some people. Your growth will offend those who benefit from your silence. Your boundaries will frustrate those who relied on your self-abandonment. Your truth will sound like betrayal to those who never cared to understand you. But live it anyway, because living for others will win you temporary praise. But living in truth will give you permanent peace. And peace, not perfection, is the goal. Society wants you to move in a straight line. School, career, marriage, kids, retirement. But what if your path looks more like a spiral? What if your success doesn't follow a timeline, but a transformation? There's no deadline for becoming whole. No expiration date on choosing authenticity. You're not behind. You're just done pretending. Here's what living authentically really looks like. Saying no without explaining, resting without guilt, loving yourself without apology, choosing alignment over appearance, walking away from roles that no longer fit. You stop choosing what looks good. You start choosing what feels good. And when you do that, you stop needing the world to clap because your soul finally does. Let me tell you something most people won't. You don't owe anyone the version of you they created in their mind. You don't owe your younger self the dream she had before she knew better. You don't owe your family a life that fits their mold. You don't owe your past relationships a continuation of who you were. You owe yourself truth. You owe yourself joy. You owe yourself a life that feels like freedom on the inside, not just filtered on the outside. And when you start living that way authentically, honestly, unfiltered, something shifts. You begin to attract people who don't want the mask. People who aren't impressed by performance. People who are inspired by presence. The real ones don't need you to pretend. They just want to know that when they look into your eyes, the person looking back isn't playing a part. So let me ask you this. What parts of yourself are you still dimming to fit a mold that no longer fits you? Who would you be if you let all of that go? The expectations, the guilt, the fear. What would it feel like to live as you fully? Because the world doesn't need another imitation. It needs you, unmasked, unscripted, unstoppable. Let me tell you something real. Strength isn't found in how loud you are. It's not in how much you post or how many people you can call when life falls apart. Strength is found in that quiet moment when the world goes silent, your plans collapse, the phone doesn't ring, and you still rise anyway. That is emotional resilience. That is self-reliance. That is the fire that no one sees, but it's the fire that saves you. Most people are emotionally fragile because they've never had to face themselves. They fall apart at the first sign of rejection. They depend on others to make sense of their emotions. They hand out their peace like it's a gift someone else gets to control. But a woman on the path to becoming unshakable, she makes a different choice. She doesn't outsource her strength. She builds it day by day, through the storms, through the silence, through the setbacks. Emotional resilience is not about pretending to be okay. It's about knowing how to be not okay and still keep moving forward. It's waking up with anxiety in your chest, but choosing presence. It's crying in your car, then wiping your tears and doing the next right thing. It's facing betrayal, heartbreak, disappointment, and not letting it turn you bitter. That's real resilience. Not hardening, but healing. Not suppressing, but surrendering without self-destruction. I want to say this loud for every woman who thinks she's too emotional. Your emotions aren't your weakness, they're your compass. But if you don't learn how to read them, they'll control you. You'll react instead of respond. You'll spiral instead of grow. You'll need people to rescue you instead of learning to rescue yourself. And I'm here to remind you, you can be your own rescue. When you're emotionally resilient, you don't fall apart when someone leaves. You don't collapse when life doesn't go your way. You feel it fully. You grieve, you get angry, you ask the hard questions, but you do it with awareness. You don't run from the pain. You meet it at the door. You look it in the eyes and say, I see you, but you don't get to control me. That's self-reliance. It's the realization that even if no one comes, you still have yourself. Even if they don't understand you, you still honor your truth. Even if it gets lonely, you still don't go back to what broke you just to feel company again. Let me be honest with you. You will not always have someone to call. There will be nights when the silence feels like punishment. There will be days when no one checks in. And it'll be tempting to spiral, to shrink, to beg, to chase. But you don't, because you've learned to trust your own presence. You've learned to stop reaching outward for what can only be built inward. This is the journey of becoming whole, when you no longer need validation to know you're valuable, when you no longer need apologies to start healing, when you no longer need to be saved because you've learned to save your own soul. It's not about being cold, it's about being clear. Clear on your worth, clear on your peace, clear on your boundaries. Here's what emotional resilience does not mean. It doesn't mean you never ask for help. It doesn't mean you never fall apart. It doesn't mean you have to do life alone. It means that when support comes, you receive it, not depend on it. It means that you can walk alone, and when someone walks beside you, it's a bonus, not a requirement. That's the difference between survival and sovereignty. Let's talk about disappointment for a second. One of the most powerful traits of an emotionally resilient woman is this. She knows how to let go without losing herself. People will disappoint you, not because they're bad, but because they're human. Sometimes you'll expect loyalty and get silence. Sometimes you'll expect consistency and get chaos. But when you're anchored within, you don't collapse. You adjust. You breathe. You mourn what you hoped it would be. And then you recenter, because disappointment doesn't define you, your response does. The more you master emotional self-reliance, the less you tolerate emotional chaos. You stop making excuses for people who bring storms into your life. You stop over-explaining your boundaries. You stop waiting for closure from people who don't even understand what they broke. And here's the thing. You don't need closure when you've given yourself clarity. You don't need people to understand your healing. You just need to choose it over and over again. Let me give you this truth to carry. Every time you regulate your nervous system instead of reacting, you rise. Every time you choose stillness over spiraling, you rise. Every time you choose not to chase, not to beg, not to break, you rise. And every single one of those moments builds emotional muscle. You don't see it on the outside. There's no applause, no trophy, no one cheering you on in the silence. But inside, your spirit is becoming unshakable. The woman who walks this path of self-reliance becomes magnetic. Why? Because her peace isn't performative. Her power isn't loud. Her strength isn't borrowed, it's built. People feel it when she enters a room. She doesn't need to dominate. Her grounded presence speaks louder than any words. She doesn't react to everything. She doesn't explain herself to everyone. She doesn't allow every emotion to hijack her. She's in control, not because she suppresses, but because she understands You don't become emotionally resilient overnight. It happens each time you choose grace instead of gossip. Each time you hold space for your own healing. Each time you stop outsourcing your emotional safety to people who never earned it. And slowly, your baseline changes. What used to trigger you now teaches you. What used to break you now builds you. What used to define you now refines you. So the next time the storm comes, and it will remember this, you've already walked through fires they never saw. You've already held yourself when no one else did. You've already proven you can fall, feel, and still rise again. This is your power, and no one can take it from you. Let's get something straight right now. You cannot evolve into the woman you're meant to be while constantly abandoning yourself for others. You cannot heal while hustling for everyone else's approval. You cannot grow while giving away your energy to things that no longer align. You cannot hear your purpose while drowning in obligations that were never yours to carry. And yet, this is what so many women do every single day. They wake up and immediately go into service mode, fixing, rescuing, showing up, performing. They delay their dreams to support everyone else's. They shrink their needs so no one feels inconvenienced. But one day, she wakes up and asks, what if I put that same energy into myself? Not in a selfish way, but in a sacred way, because growth is not selfish. Self-care is not indulgence. Purpose is not optional. Let's talk about what it really means to prioritize growth. It doesn't mean constant productivity. It doesn't mean you're always on. It doesn't mean burning yourself out for a better version of yourself. It means being committed to the woman you're becoming. Even when it's hard, even when it's slow, even when no one sees the progress, growth means asking yourself every single day, what am I learning? What am I releasing? What am I ready to rise into? Because if you're not evolving, you're repeating. And most people aren't stuck. They're just addicted to their old selves. Self-care in this season looks different. It's not bubble baths and facials, though those have their place. Real self-care is discipline. It's boundaries. It's choosing what's uncomfortable in the short term to protect your long-term peace. It's saying no even when your voice shakes. It's canceling plans when your spirit says rest. It's walking away from energy that feels off, even if you can't explain why. Self-care is looking in the mirror and saying, I will not abandon you today, not for validation, not for acceptance, not for love that asks you to betray yourself to receive it. I want you to hear me on this. You are allowed to prioritize yourself. You are allowed to outgrow relationships. You are allowed to redesign your life. You are allowed to want more, even if the people around you don't understand, because you are the only one who has to live with the choices you make. Let me tell you what purpose really, Island. It's not just a career. It's not just a passion. It's not a perfect path with a 10-year plan. Purpose is alignment. It's waking up and knowing your life reflects your values. It's living with intention, not just inertia. It's pouring into what fuels you, not what drains you. And most importantly, it's knowing that your existence has impact even in the small things. The way you speak, the way you listen, the way you show up for yourself, the way you treat your own time, body, and spirit. Purpose is when your daily life becomes a sacred expression of your truth. But here's the trap many people fall into. They wait for permission to grow. They wait for support to start healing. They wait for perfect conditions to pursue what's been burning in them for years. Let me ask you, how long will you wait? How many more years will you silence that dream? How much more of your peace will you sacrifice to maintain someone else's comfort? You don't need permission. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need a decision. The decision to prioritize your growth. The decision to put yourself on your own calendar. The decision to stop being a background character in your own life. Let me give you a picture. Imagine the woman who decides she's done waiting. She wakes up and chooses alignment over appearance. She stops explaining herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. She invests in her mind, her body, her soul, like it actually matters. She doesn't need a dramatic transformation. She just makes one small aligned choice again and again. And before she knows it, she's unrecognizable in the best way. Not because she became someone else, but because she returned to herself. This is what happens when a woman prioritizes her growth. Her standards rise, her peace becomes non-negotiable, her energy becomes sacred, her time becomes intentional, her circle becomes refined. She stops entertaining confusion, she stops participating in dysfunction, she stops negotiating her worth because she's finally seeing herself clearly. And once you see yourself, really see yourself, you stop settling for anything less. I want you to know this. You don't need to burn out to be worthy. You don't need to be everything for everyone. You don't need to wait until you hit rock bottom to choose yourself. You can decide right now to rest, to rise, to reset, to redesign. You can choose a new way of being, one that honors your energy, your evolution, and your essence. Let me leave you with this. The woman who walks alone doesn't walk aimlessly. She walks intentionally. She knows where she's going, even if the road is quiet. She chooses peace, even if it means losing people. She chooses purpose, even if no one claps. And in that solitude, she meets the most important person she'll ever know, herself. This is the becoming, the shedding, the awakening, the rise. She doesn't need saving. She doesn't need fixing. She just needed permission to choose herself, and now she's unstoppable.